So, hi everybody, I'm Rob. This is the last time I did this session, as Lauren mentioned, it was a room full of like 50 people. So it was a very different dynamic than what this is going to be, and I'm really excited about the opportunity to do this in a much smaller setting with people who are probably better artists than myself by and large. So I'm probably the worst artist in the room. Which you'll get why I'm up here in a second. But because this is a smaller group, I want to keep this pretty loose and informal relative to the last way I did this. So I'm going to kind of wing a little bit of this as I go along just to keep it a little more loose and interactive. So as we go through this, if you guys have questions, you want me to unpack something a little bit more, don't hesitate to jump in and do that, because I think with the small group, it's going to, I think, probably work better for all of us if we do it that way. So. For those folks on the phone, this is going to be a little bit of a strange exercise at a certain point because there is a group collaboration aspect to this that folks on the phone will be a little bit limited in their ability to be able to do. So apologies in advance for that, but at least you'll get a sense for kind of how all this fits together in terms of it being a toolkit that you can use in your own design practices, such as they may be in your work lives. So with that, I'll jump in. So we're here to talk about building creative confidence through sketching, and what does that mean, and what are we going to do? I'll do a quick overview. I promise I won't do too much blah blah blah. We'll do a little bit of warm-up sketching, and then we'll jump into a structure that I call Design Studio, that if you guys are familiar with the concept of design charrettes, if you've seen those done before, this is basically sort of a takeoff of that, with the intention of building from individual sketching as a form of sort of visual brainstorming and visual thinking, and bridging that into a collaborative structure that helps you as you work with your project partners, whether it's an experience, digital experience design or a physical service design exercise, to take what that group is thinking about individually and start to bring it together and remix and recombine that stuff into something that ideally, when you come out the other end of it, is greater than the sum of its parts. So it's going to be kind of a meta exercise, I think, for you. It's sort of, I like to think of this as sort of learning by doing. You'll be the sort of guinea pig actually participating in this experience, and hopefully it gives you a sense for, okay, now if I'm up here where Rob is standing, I can walk somebody's plural else through this experience as well. So we'll go through that. We'll do some quick group presentations and feedback and debrief, share out kind of thing, and then we'll call it a night. So that's me. Well, that's my Bitmoji little C. He's got a burgeoning rap career that is in the works. He's a much more talented singer and artist than I am. So who am I? Why am I up here? I'm a product manager and user experience designer by sort of recent background. It's the second chapter in a career that started with a number of years in the media space as a reporter and editor. I ended up stumbling out of the newsroom one afternoon and sort of wandered into the business side of media, and somebody said, hey, let's make that guy a product manager, and I've kind of been doing that ever since. I got exposed to design thinking methods back in like 2010, and sort of when IDEO was just really starting to sort of become a thing that people were talking about beyond the confines of Silicon Valley, right? And one of the key practices in design thinking is doing what people call low fidelity prototyping, right? And I was finding more and more often that I was picking up a Sharpie and using, white printer paper and Sharpies to convey intent when coming up with a concept that I was either trying to sell to leadership or test with customers, and sort of ended up kind of bridging from that into a sort of companion skill set in the user experience design space. So that's kind of what I do generally. Today I am with Strayer University just up the road in Herndon. I lead a team that manages the university's owned marketing platforms, strayer.edu, paid media landing pages, that sort of thing. And really I'm trying to look at it from the perspective of how can we solve interesting human problems for a cohort of people who, as working adults pursuing higher education, have some real challenges in their lives. So that's kind of the day job. On the side, I have sort of a side hustle as UX consultancy of one. I do user experience strategy and content development on the side, and I also do workshops like this. So I'm not unbusy. And one more thing, I can't draw. Said that, right? So, yeah. So why the hell am I up here? Being a terrible artist is my superpower. And I'll explain more about why in a second. Okay, that's great, that's helpful. So it sounds like kind of a common theme in this is that you all in some way or another are working with others in creative pursuits in the broadest sense, right? I mean, even to the extent that conflict resolution is a skill that requires creative thinking in terms of attacking problems differently to resolve conflict, right? Like, as we work with others, the thing where I'm bringing this quote into it, this is from Tom and David Kelly, the founders of the design firm Ideation. And this actually is from an article in Harvard Business Review, but it was the springboard for them into a book called Creative Confidence that explores the idea of what we as people in the design space can do and should do in working with others to achieve creative outcomes, whether it's a business problem or a design that we're working through or whatever. And the realization that they had was that it's not our job to teach people how to be creative, but rather helping them unlock the creativity that they already have. The premise that the Kellys bring to this conversation is that we all have the capability to be creative, and probably all at some time in our lives were. Like, we all were unafraid as kindergartners to pick up crayons and just get our scribble on, right? And then at some point, somebody probably told us, like, oh, that doesn't look like a tiger. That's the most terrible dinosaur I've ever seen. And our little hearts were crushed, and we never picked up crayons again. And then we became old graybeard executives that y'all end up working with, and you can't understand why we don't want to pick that Sharpie up. It's because it's extremely insecurity producing, and oh my God, I'm not good at this. I can't draw, particularly for you guys, right? Because you're, to one extent or another, probably hearing things like, oh, you're a way better artist than me. You just do it. No, that's not the point, right? We can all draw, in theory. So what holds people back? Zombies. No, not zombies. Fear, right? Fear of the messy unknown, of being judged, of taking that first step, of taking the cap off of the Sharpie, of losing control, right? It's, I have dealt with executives that I've tried to get around a room to achieve consensus, and when you take them out of their comfort zone and ask them to be creative, they vapor lock, right? Or I can't do that. You're the designer, you do it. Just make it pretty, right? How many times have you heard that? Just make it pretty. That's not the point of what we do here. And we know what happens with fear, right? Fear leads to hate, hate leads to suffering, suffering is the path to the dark side, right? Cool, so that makes sense, right? So how does sketching help? I firmly believe if we can get our design partners to pick up a Sharpie and join us in drawing, it unlocks huge potential for faster, better, more interesting outcomes. It helps us read minds. Like, not literally, although if I can invent that, like, I so wouldn't be here with y'all. As much as I love you and I feel like we're already fast friends, I would make it a mint if that actually was a mind reading device. Unfortunately, it's not. But we have the next best thing with a Sharpie, right? Because how many times have you heard, if you've ever been in a design project, the close equivalent of you're the designer, just make it pretty? It's the, I don't know, it just needs to pop. I hate you so much right now. Or it needs to appeal to millennials. You know what I mean, right? No, I don't. Or it's like Pandora, but for pet rescue. You can make that work, right? No, I can't see what's in your head. But if I can get you to pick up a Sharpie and start to express that, even in the rawest form, that's more than I had coming into it. And it gives me a window into what you're seeing. Because we all have a different mental model for sort of how the world works, right? And to get that inside perspective, literally inside their head perspective on what their mental model is for what Pandora for Pet Rescue actually means, getting them to express that is huge. It also helps us align. So again, that's sort of because mental models all differ a little bit, right? Your understanding of how you would commute from Herndon to here is very different than mine. And so if I asked you to draw that commute for me, draw that experience of commuting, it would look very different. And if we wanted to get to a place where we had a common understanding of what commuting from Herndon to Chantilly means, getting everybody to at least take a pass at expressing that on paper helps you see those gaps between where the common understanding is and where the sort of outlier perspectives are. And when you can address those outlier perspectives, it gives you the ability to start to bring people back into consensus without ending up with a watered down, compromised seventh draft of the Port Huron statement kind of solution. And lastly, it helps us build buy-in, right? And what do I mean by that? You know who these guys are? You've seen these guys before, right? These are the IKEA guys, right? Yeah. And I put that up as a little bit of a joke, but is anybody in the room familiar with the IKEA effect? You guys heard of this? It's really cool. Go home and look it up on the Wikipedia machine, because I'll explain it badly, but the sort of high level version of it is there's research that's been done that proves that when you participate in the making of a thing, you develop an outsized investment in that thing, right? It's the idea of like, you made that piece of IKEA furniture, you put, blood, sweat, and, hex wrenches and tears into the making of it. You're way more invested in that than you would be the, $90 bookshelf that you bought from Target, right? And that IKEA effect can be really valuable in trying to build buy-in around a particular thing that you're trying to get across the finish line in your work life. If you can get the boss to help you express what that thing might be, even in the earliest, rawest stages, he or she's going to feel much more invested in it. And when it comes back around as a fully polished design solution much later in the movie, they're going to look at that and go, yeah, I helped make that. That's part of me is in that. And that's huge. And something to bear in mind as we think about what we're going to be doing in the exercises ahead. On a short enough timeline, even great artists scribble. I don't know if you guys have seen this kind of exercise done before, these sort of 10-1-10s. You can find them on YouTube. They give you 10 minutes to draw Spider-Man, right? And then 1 minute to draw the same thing, and then 10 seconds to draw the same thing. Even somebody who's capable of this amazing rendition of Spider-Man on the left, when given just 10 seconds, was reduced to just really rough gestural sketching, right? And the reason that that's important is in this framework, the time is very constrained by intent to even the playing field between people in the room who are participating in this exercise with you who have some level of artistic talent and those people who don't, because on, again, a short enough timeline, everybody is just doing quick, rough gestural sketching. So that's where my superpower in this workshop framework comes in. I can't draw, and so can you. So the structure we're going to go through, it's like I said, it's based on design charrettes, and it layers a couple additional pieces into it that help you get to a level of consensus and prioritization when working with multiple stakeholders who often have different opinions about the way the world should work. But it all kind of frames up around sketching, present and critique, convergence, and then prioritization. And we're going to skip prioritization because we're just not going to have enough time to get through that tonight. It's sort of less central to the sort of drawing piece, but keep in the back of your mind that there is, after the drawing's done, exercises that you can do to help people that you're working with start to prioritize down around what of all the stuff that you created that afternoon might actually be something that they want to carry forward. And we'll talk more about that later. But the nice thing about this framework is you really can sort of remix and iterate on it in different ways, depending on how much time you have, how many people you can get in the room, how specific the design is that you're trying to achieve. Like, you might be unpacking a really wicked problem that you don't even really fully understand from a problem perspective. I don't even know what the problem is, let alone what the solution might be. And so you're just kind of reverse engineering back into figuring out the problem space. That you're going to need to spend a lot more time with, do a lot more iterations. If it's just, we need to come up with designs for a homepage and I need to get 5 people to agree on what should be above the fold, you can do that in an hour. So it really is a very flexible framework. And as you start to get into it, your sketches are going to look like this, right? Yeah, no, just kidding. They're going to look like this, right? This is the kind of sketching that we're talking about. And I mean, I'm making jokes, but the point of this is even just organizing, and anybody who's doing visual, has done visual recording and sketchnoting is going to totally grok this. Even just organizing textual information in a visually cohesive way is sketching, in a sense. And so as you consider that in the context of what you're going to do here tonight, it's okay to put words on paper as well. These don't have to be, you know, Leonardo da Vinci stuff. And this is a prototype that somebody put together that, like, obviously it's as much text as it is anything else, and that's okay. Sketching is very free form in this context, right? This is not sketching with the intent of industrial design being the output, right? So again, people who are more comfortable with drawing are probably going to be pretty familiar with this, but these are pretty much your typical sketch objects. If you can draw a square, a circle, and a triangle, you know pretty much everything you need to know to start sketching, because these shapes appear over and over and over again in nature. And as you step back from the thing that you're looking at, you'll see, oh, right, there's the triangle, there's the circle, there's the square. And if you start kind of roughing in something at that level of simplicity, you'll find that you probably don't even have to take it much further than that square, circle, or triangle in order to get the person that you're sketching for to understand what you're trying to do. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then sketch tools. I mean, this is for this kind of gig, these are the tools of the trade, right? You know, and if you're really fancy, you can do like me and you can do the dual tip Sharpie. Woo! Blunt on one end, fine on the other. But, you know, and then for those of you who are doing visual recording, you start to get a little crazy, right? Ooh, maybe bring in some red for some notes, or maybe some highlighter to add some accent and emphasis. Or if you're getting really, really creative, there's gray sketch markers to add shading, you know, add emphasis to, like, if you're going to do you know, again, I'm very digitally focused, so I'm going to use a lot of digital examples. If you're doing a pop-up box on a web page, you can put a little shadow underneath it to kind of give it that sense of it's popping off the page. And then this one on the far left, does anybody know what that is? That is a photo blue pencil. You can draw with that on a piece of paper, and once you Xerox that paper, the blue disappears. What? Yeah, it's super cool. Like if you are just kind of roughing something in and then you need to make that rough in go away, you use a photo blue pencil and then photocopy it. Gone. It's amazing. But again, really, all you need at the core of it, those two things. Some people hate Sharpies. I love them because try to go.
And I have found in doing things in blue pencil, it just looks different than what people expect. So Absolutely. It looks like this is something special.
Yes.
Somebody put some thought into this.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't understand what you drew, but it's different than what I've seen before.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and that's where you kind of look at this in the aggregate. This is design theater, right? Are you guys familiar with the term design theater? They're sort of looking designy for the sake of looking designy. So, right? It's the window dressing that makes it seem more sophisticated than it actually is. You can draw a pop-up box without a shadow, right? And somebody's gonna get it. But if you want to look like the slick designer in the room, look at that. It's got some shadow, it's got some shading. Woo. So, point of that, again, I'm making jokes, but use design theater to your advantage in situations like this. If you feel like you need to kind of own the room a little bit, bring a little bit of design theater. If you need to sort of get back more on peer level equal footing, walk that sort of big D designer back a little bit and kind of play your design role to the audience you're trying to influence. Good? All right, let's do this. So we're gonna do a warm up. So at this point, grab a sheet of paper. Hopefully you get recycled paper and whatnot. Thank you. So meta moment while you guys are getting paper. The point of this exercise is for non-artists, it's to get them comfortable putting pen to paper, right? Because it's completely consequence-free. It has nothing to do with the actual thing you're going to be doing. This is about just getting that person who's afraid to draw because they got told that they stink at drawing back when they were 5 years old to pick the pen up again and start drawing again. So that's what we're going to do. We'll do this real quick over like 5 minutes. Sharpie or blue pen, whichever you prefer to use. Take your paper and draw a bunch of squiggles, just kind of big circular squiggles on the paper. All right, so it seems like everybody's got enough first. We can focus back in now. The point of this exercise, and this is again something that you can use to reinforce with your participants. The thing that's really fun about this is it's really easy to see the birds in the squiggles, right? Once you actually start making them, you very quickly realize how easy it is to take something that's as abstract as a squiggle and to turn it into something that looks like the thing you're trying to get across, right? It emphasizes the notion of the value of quick gestural sketching as a way to convey intent. And that person who feels like they don't know how to draw, you can put a squiggle, 2 triangles, and 2 sticks on it, and suddenly it's a bird, right? And that, I think, is a really useful way to introduce sketching for a timid crowd. There's other exercises you can do to get people warmed up with a pen and paper, depending on the intent of what you're going to try and get out of them in that exercise. There's a book called Game Storming that has a lot of these kind of exercises, and then there's another one called Draw Toast. That is a really interesting one if you want to get people thinking about a process design, service design perspective. And again, sort of playing with mental models around the idea of, in the Draw Toast exercise, you ask people to each draw the process of making toast and then have them kind of compare what that process looks like. And it becomes very apparent very quickly both how everybody's mental model for making toast is a little different from one another, and yet also there's commonality in what people end up drawing insofar as there's typically probably 5 to 7 steps, because that's the way our short-term memory works. It's 7 plus or minus 2, right? This is the amount of things you can keep in that short-term memory bank. It's a really nice way to teach some of those lessons. So it's another useful thing to bring in if Squiggle Birds isn't the right approach. So now we're gonna do another quick warm-up. And this, again, the intention is to take the participants in your group from the abstract to the real, right? And so we've gone from abstract birds. Now we're going to take step 2. Step 2 is sketching something that's been on your mind today. You know, is it a problem that you were wrestling with at work? Is it something like, oh, I need to reorganize my laundry room this weekend and I want to sketch out what that should look like? Just something that's been rattling around in your head today that you can potentially express visually. And if you're drawing a blank and you're like, Rob, I got nothing, I'm cooked. I dumped all the stuff that was in my head when I walked in the door. Just doodle, and eventually something will come out. Again, the intention is to sort of get your hand moving on the paper and start taking what's in your head and letting it express out through your hand. So we'll do that over the next kind of 5 minutes. Okay, you guys good? Feel like you got enough down on paper to feel like you sort of got the idea. So how'd that feel? Like going from just sort of squiggling and doodling to actually trying to get something on your head on paper? Did it feel awkward, easy?
I felt kind of therapeutic.
Interesting. Why is that?
Because just don't really reflect on it. You don't think about it during that time up until right now. Just reflecting on it, just I guess, just trying to get it out of your chest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and the thing that's interesting about that too, and it's kind of building on your point a little bit, this kind of sketching where it's sort of just really quick, rough, gestural, not overthought, it kind of lines up with the way our brains work when we're just kind of free thinking, right? It's when you're kind of free thinking and sort of knitting things together in your head, it's not as structured and rigid as the way that we would think that it would be. Like if somebody asks you to draw something, or, you know, in the sort of engineering diagram sense of the word, right? To just sort of be loose and free with your hand. It's a connection between your head and what's happening on the paper in a way that provides a feedback loop that kind of gets your brain into a mode where it's more ready to make connections between disparate elements that are floating around. For people who have a hard time in brainstorming environments where it's just, oh, we're just going to get in a room and throw out ideas. Blah, right? Those are always awkward. They're always kind of a disaster, right? Because it's not easy to sort of just be creative on command, but giving people tools to express thoughts in different ways, like this kind of sketching thing, will help to facilitate that. So with warm-ups out of the way, we're going to dive into the studio session. So now it's going to get real. So our design challenge, I'm giving you a design challenge because we all do different things. We come from different worlds and we all have different business problems we're dealing with. In an ideal world, if you're doing this in your work life, you will have done some pre-work ahead of time with your peers, your leadership, your teams, whatever, to figure out what that design challenge is and bring the necessary amount of research to the table to get everybody kind of level set around the problem space that you're exploring and what potential opportunities might exist. We obviously have not had that time here, so I'm going to give you a design challenge, which is designing a solution for displaying flowers in your home. You're like, but Rob, that's a vase. Yes, it is technically, yes, but you can take it so much further than a vase. Every time I've done this exercise, I have seen people blow my minds with the creative solutions that they came up with as they thought beyond the vase to other ways to display flowers now. So, that makes sense? Okay, so first round, this is going to be this. The next thing I'm going to ask you to do is going to be the hardest thing you will have to do tonight. Everybody pick up an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, blank. Pick it up, hold it above your head. I will do it too. I practice my preach. Okay, now take that paper, fold it in half vertically. You don't have to do it over your head.
Another hamburger or a hot dog?
And now, does everybody have it folded vertically? Okay, you guys are amazing. In the last two groups I've done this for, somebody screwed it up. Now, with it folded vertically, fold it in thirds. You guys are blowing my minds. All right, good. Now, unfold it. You have just made what we in the business refer to as a 6-up template, which is a really fancy way of saying you now have a single sheet of paper that's been turned into six smaller sheets of paper, each one of which is that much less intimidating for somebody who is not comfortable drawing, because you have given them a smaller canvas. The paralysis of the blank canvas for somebody who does not draw for a living is terrifying, and the bigger the canvas, the bigger the paralysis. Oh my God, there's all this space and there's all this stuff I could put on it and I don't know where to start. And we're trying to make this we're breaking it down Barney style for people, and we're making it really simple and really not intimidating to pick up a pen and start drawing. If anybody's familiar with how behavior change happens, there's this notion of presenting a prompt to the user or to the person whose behavior you want to change. And you can pull one of two levers with that person. You can pull on motivation or you can pull on ability. And you can change motivation temporarily, but motivation will always wax and wane, right? Ability, teaching somebody that they can do a thing by either giving them an ability they didn't have before or changing their perception of their abilities, is what creates lasting change in behavior. And for this, trying to get people to draw who aren't used to drawing, you're changing the ability level, perceived ability level, by giving them a smaller tile to work with. So, the 6-up template. So, in this first round with your 6-up template, what we're going to do is sketch in those tiles various potential solutions for how one might display flowers in the home. Either 6 different concepts, variation on a theme, whatever. The intention here is to go for quantity over quality. You don't want to take too much time on each sketch, and really push your thinking as you go through each. Your first instinct is going to be like, yeah, Rob, it's a vase. Yeah, sure. If that's where you want to start with the vase, and then push yourself forward. And the key here is that we're going to do this in 6 minutes. So if you can get to 6 sketches in 6 minutes, I will be duly impressed, because nobody ever does. But that's kind of the heart of it. That's the heart of it. So does that all make sense? Okay, 6 minutes. So, things to think about while you're doing this. You guys don't have to look up. I'm just going to jabber while you draw. If you find yourself struggling to express something different than your last one, you can introduce constraints, because constraints often do drive creativity. So you could look at it on a different scenario kind of basis, right? Like, what would a solution for designing flowers in the home be for someone who has an allergy to plant pollen? Or what would it look like for somebody who's very adamant about displaying flowers in a sustainable way? But to have those kind of prompts in your mind as you're working with people on these kind of exercises to kind of pull out and sort of throw into the mix can be really helpful. And that is time. Pens down. How'd that feel? Good, bad, man?
Challenging.
Kind of hard.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Who got 6? 5? 4? 3? 2? 1? None? Okay, everybody got a few, right? You get stuck. You're like, oh, I want to push this one further because I'm interested in this one, or oh, God, I got nothing, right? Yeah, most people don't get to 6. But the intent of this is to really go wide and explore, right? To let your mind go beyond the obvious solution, right? It's oftentimes we solution before we even fully understand the problem. And as I was talking while you guys were drawing, there's all these different potential permutations of use cases, right? That could affect the solution. And once you start to think about the implications of those and understanding how those apply to different kind of quote unquote extreme users in sort of design thinking sense of the word, how does the perspective that you have on having sketched something for each one of those extreme users, how then does that inform a solution that might then work for the mass in the middle, so to speak? And the more you can kind of flare wide, explore all these different possibilities early, it gives you grist in your mental mill to sort of think through, okay, now how do I start to narrow from this really wide focus up front and take the best of what I've come up with over past rounds of ideation and start to bring that together into a new whole that hopefully does something that's better than some of its parts. So that's kind of the idea of that. So we're going to do a quick round of present and critique, and we'll treat these as 2 groups, 1 group 2. So we'll take 10 minutes, and at your table, each person take 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes to walk the others in your table through what you came up with as a potential solution and get feedback from them on each of those solutions that hopefully you can take into the next round of sketching that will allow you to take those concepts further. So the idea in mind is we're going to do another round of individual sketching after this. And the intention is that you go into that second round with both your drawings from this first round as well as feedback from your peers on the goods and bads of each one of those concepts you came up with so that you've got enough raw material to take that idea the next step forward. So when you're giving feedback, keep it brief, kind of focus on clarifying the presenter's intention with what they were trying to get across in that solution. A really good question to ask is, how does solution X address the user's problem? What specific problem were you trying to solve here? And do you feel like that accomplished that? And if not, what could you do differently with it? And really kind of probe those ideas a little bit more to help that particular artist kind of unpack those ideas a little bit. Does that all make sense? Yeah? Okay. Then 10 minutes. Has everybody gotten feedback on their designs? We're good? Okay. Yeah, obviously you guys already have begun to stretch your imaginations. In a real world environment, when you're doing this on the job, you're going to see a pretty wide degree of variance. Your laggards are going to struggle with this a little bit, and they'll come up with 1, maybe 2. They're the ones that like, yeah, Rob, I drew a vase. I'm not really sure. I just kind of, right? And then you're going to have people who are like you guys, where you're like, oh, and then I could get a beaver, and I could tie flowers to its tail, and it'll build a whatever. It's like, and getting those people to come together and find common ground in their solutions is where this is kind of art as much as it is science. So, but this process helps you get through that. So now we're going to do a second round, and we're going to raise the stakes a little bit. Instead of a 6-up template, you're going to use the highly technical 1-up template, which is an 8.5 by 11 sheet paper. So bigger canvas, potentially more intimidating for your non-artist, but hopefully by this point they have done enough sketching with you that they're going to feel comfortable taking on that bigger canvas, right? They've gotten a few ideas down on paper. They've got some feedback on those ideas. Now let's take it another step. So like Nami was saying in her flowers in the tub situation, I don't really know how this is going to work because I can't really bathe in soil, but it's a cool idea, right? And it's interesting. How can we take that further and push that a little bit, stretch that thinking a little bit, start to unpack it a little bit more? This is what that second round can kind of do for you. So your original 6 ideas, your feedback, steal from others, it's all at your disposal. Come up with one big idea on that single sheet. And the goal is to get an idea together that you believe of the grist that you've got in your hands, which one has the most merit, and kind of come up with a more evolved concept for that idea. And again, you can use words, notations, right? Like describe how something works, or how one might interact with it, that sort of thing. So it's basically taking that idea and pushing it one more step forward. So does that make sense? Questions? Pretty straightforward. Okay. Again, 6 minutes. keeping it tight and sloppy and gestural, and go. Same deal, present and critique. Same drill as last time, right? Small group, talk through what you came up with, get feedback, because after this, we're going to go into a collaborative exercise. You guys have been drawing individually thus far, sitting in awkward silence and sort of scribbling individually. We're done with the awkward silence. Now you guys get to engage in much louder and more goofy shenanigans around your table as a group, because what we're going to do is, from our 6-up templates, from our 1-up templates, each of us bringing something unique and different to the conversation, try and come up with one concept in that third round that takes the best of what everybody around the table came up with. So share out in this second half of round 2 what you came up with in this 1-up template, and to the extent that you can sort of keep in your head what somebody walked you through as you're going around the table, sort of store that stuff in the back of your head, because you're going to be using that as a group in the next round. So again, 2 minutes per person, feedback, go. So a couple things there, just kind of unpacking that a little bit.
Sure.
Kate and I were talking about sort of where people get stuck and what people do during this stage. And I actually wanted to talk about what she did as sort of an example of kind of where this can go in round 2. She had come up with this sort of concept for a bookend that has flowers built into it, and then realized sort of halfway through that first round of drawing, crap, there's this problem, right? Books and water don't mix. Rather than scrap the idea, she sat there and sort of scratched away at it a little bit more, like a cat, and came up with a solution instead where it's a rock with a hole in the center of it that one would keep perhaps grasses or something in, so you can have a display that still protects your books, which point of all that is sort of coming at a problem from a different angle in that second round, right? The other thing that tends to happen sometimes is like, well, where we saw Hannah go, you know, she sort of, as she was finishing up her brief, sort of talked about it being, well, this isn't really where the thing was supposed to go, but this is kind of where I went with it. That's totally okay in this stage, because this is the messy middle, right? Where you're kind of just beginning to unpack that problem a little bit more and running into, crap, I didn't think about this. That part's not gonna work, right? And you kind of bang away at it for 6 minutes. It's not that long, y'all. Again, it's grist that you're putting into that sort of mental mill for a theoretically even more polished solution in round 3. But again, this is all still going to be, when you get to the end of this, really early, really dirty. You know, nobody, I think, would ever look at what you come up with out of one of these studio sessions and say, oh yeah, go build that. I mean, if God knows we've had that happen to us before. That's great, go build it. How soon can we get this? No, that's not what this is meant to do, right? It's messy by intent. So that, anyway, just a couple things to call out. So we're gonna do one more round, and this, as promised, is collaborative team ideation. What you want to do in this phase is converge on a single concept. And you're like, oh my God, everybody around the table came up with something slightly different. What are we gonna do with it? But Trina over here already is remixing what that table did, even in round 2. And you start to see the possibilities in starting to sort of unpack and put this stuff together. So in this, we're gonna use a large format Post-it, and you can draw on the Post-it, you can attach 8.5 by 11 sheets to the Post-it. However you wanna roll with that is fine. Feel free to freestyle to whatever gets you to a place where you're able to express that idea. The challenge that you're gonna have is to get to consensus around an idea, you're gonna have to pare back, right? Because you have too much stuff right there. You may not feel like it, but once you start doing this, you're gonna feel like wow, okay, there's actually a lot of really cool stuff here. What is the best of it and how do we use it? You know, the ability to quickly make decisions in a collaborative fashion and parking lot things aggressively, because you're just never gonna be able to do that much with it. You gotta move fast and pare back quickly. And I will share with you one framework that I think is really useful for kind of taking this mess of stuff that you've got and figuring out what to do with it. It's an acronym called SCAMPER, and I'm just read it off, right? You can substitute things, you can You can combine different elements, you can adapt existing elements, you can modify, magnify, minimize, like what might that thing be, that scratching post that you came up with, blown out to 3 times its size, or cut down to 1/3 of its size. How does that change how that might be introduced into a combined product? Put a thing to a different use, like they did with Uncle Leo. Eliminate features, reverse or rearrange things. So it's as you sort of get stuck in the process of figuring out, okay, what am I actually going to do with this stuff? Think about these different ways of using disparate elements to repackage them in different ways. So in this phase, we'll spend 15 minutes doing this rather than 20, since we're a little tight on time. And then we'll finish up with team brief outs on what you guys came up with in each group. And then we'll wind down for the night. Who wants to share first?
Oh, really? We do.
Go!
Go, Trina. Wait, maybe Isabella should. What is that? I hung it. Oh, would you like to read?
And by sure she means.
Hell no, not really.
You got this.
Woo!
Okay, so can everyone see over there? I know it's a little tiny. Feel free to walk up and, you know, take in all the detail. So we at this table really love cats, indoor cats, outdoor cats, all kinds of cats. And as you'll find out, we really hate squirrels.
Squirrels comes up in this workshop over and over again. This is not the first group to have brought in squirrels.
Okay,
It's so funny. Okay, continue. Sorry.
so we're not that special.
Totally random. No, just it's
Cool.
There's something to this.
So we decided to focus on outdoor feral cats because they typically, you know, don't necessarily have shelter, and, you know, we wanted to be nice. So what we did here is we designed a cat tree, and it's called the I Can Has cat tree. And we wanted to be environmentally friendly and sustainable, so, okay. So at the bottom here, this is hydroponics. Is that what this is called? I think so, gang.
It's something.
So, and then it has a little thing where it gathers water for cats to drink. We have, let's see, some fish in the little water tank here. So cats have something to eat if they get, you know, they're in the mood for a snack.
The fish available to the cats?
Yes, and we chose a species of fish that will reproduce very quickly to make sure that, you know, there's always fish in there for the cats to eat. Let's see, then we have a squirrel trap. So it's a plant that is trained to specifically go after squirrels to keep them off our tree. So it's like a Venus flytrap, but for squirrels. And
There's an entertainment factor.
yes, we have little houses for the cats over here, and they each have their little water kind of capturing bowl next to it. We have flowers going up the tree to make it pretty and interesting. We're not sure if the flowers are edible or not, but we would try to figure out a way for the cats to be able to eat them. And another food source for the cats would be the little birds in the tree. So to encourage the birds to nest there, we put like straw-like vegetation growing around the tree so they can find everything they need to make nests, and then the cats can, you know, when they get hungry, they'll go and easy pickings. So the birds over here are
The
food.
Jurassic Park of flower plants.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna need a little help.
It's
explaining
also,
the
I think,
trap.
release. That, oh, yeah, trap, neuter, return. So it's like in communities to control feral cat populations, they have programs where they attract the cats, they take them, they neuter and return them to I Can Has cat tree. So there's a TNR program feature.
I was wondering if you were gonna have some sort of medicine or something in the plants that would sterilize them.
We can genetically modify a plant to do that.
Nice,
So-
good cover, yes.
Or tranquilizer guns.
We love the cats.
Okay.
Well, apparently you like cats more than birds.
And fish. And squirrels.
Definitely. Squirrels I'm fine with, but actually enticing birds to come so that they can be a meal.
It's the circle of life.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just encouraging the circle of life to happen quickly.
is it, Trina?
It is. I don't think you have to.
It's a very
it's like-
sustainable first people count solution.
Right.
It's just
Yeah.
sustainable.
I don't think enticing the bird. That's the only part that
I mean, we're not forcing the birds in any way. It's self-determination. We're just, planting stuff around that
If they're not
may or
smart
may
enough to
not
stay
be
away,
appealing to
survival
birds.
exists.
And there are so many birds. Really.
Who really needs them?
I mean, messy, that's true.
One can say the same about you.
That's true. And squirrels.
And
Fish.
birds actually
And
pollinate plants.
There you go.
Cats are cute.
What else should we think about now?
I mean,
Have we
this
completed
is
that
a comprehensive solution.
She is not backing down.
Yes.
You guys have gone to
All right.
the map for that one.
All right, so, group 2, group B?
Number one.
Group 2, group 1, okay, all right, who's breaking?
Oh, goodness.
I can walk through. So we talked about 2 ideas. We had this great innovative bookend that evolved to be something that would hopefully be able to house more low maintenance, low water plant, as well as some window box ideas. And we really kind of coalesced around the idea of low maintenance, easy to water, flexible, customizable, could be indoor or outdoor. So the idea is to sort of take the window box idea and bring it indoors potentially, using rope or some other sort of, probably rope, to string them together so that you could have, for instance, maybe 3 different window boxes inside your kitchen to have cabbage and then carrots and then something else.
Herbs.
We found, herbs of some sort. We also talked a lot about the idea of not wanting to have to water all the time. So a kind of quick and dirty solution for watering is to put water in a wine bottle and put it upside down. And then we, so that's our wine bottles on the right. And then we said, well, we have to be able to replenish it. Let's include, we don't want the water to drip on the floor. So let's have this nice wine rack with some sort of decorative tiled drip tray on the top so that if anything does overflow, it's caught. But then it becomes this whole like gourmet wine food experience. But if you just want to put it outside, you just put it outside as well. Is that accurate?
That's right. I think so.
I
Thank
like
you.
it.
Excellent. I love it. I love it. So what about the cats part?
They're over there.
There indeed.
Yeah, they're well taken care of.
So I see a few of my neighbors' house, just informing them in the community I live in, pretty strict with the HOA rules. We can't really grow plants or leave them outdoors, and they're restricted. So what I noticed that my neighbors do is that they get the flower boxes and hang it on the balcony
Oh,
via railings.
yeah.
So quite a few of them have done that. So that's when I saw that, I was like, oh, it seems like it's low maintenance.
Right,
That's,
right.
There you go.
Like, kinda
I
get
wonder
what's
if
going on.
You could also design like a pump that goes into each of the wine bottles and it's on a sensor, so when it drops below a certain level, it fills back again.
Then that provides no encouragement to empty new wine bottles.
Right.
So if you're
Because
reading,
they're full of life. You
Right.
guys, there's a difference. This is our circle of
so many
life.
hobbies at play.
So the thing that I like about what we're just sort of sharing at the end of that, Ahmed, is in our life as designers and in people who sort of practice design thinking in particular, there's this notion of sort of observational research, right? And seeing constraints, challenges, issues in the world and solving for them in creative, differentiated ways, right? This whole thing sounds like it started from an observation that you had in your daily life in your HOA. I can't display flowers, and so I've got this balcony situation, but how can we push that further? How can we make that more interesting, right? You guys went a completely different direction, right? Where it's, okay, let's just completely free think and see where this takes us. And you guys may have come away from that thinking like, this is totally goofy, but did it trigger something in your thinking that as you come back and attack that problem in another round, did that ability to think that loosely put you in a different place to solve that problem in a different, more creative way? You went in 2 completely different directions in terms of what that prototype looks like, but they have equal value in putting your head in a different place. And P.S., you guys went from oh, Robin's a base, to this in 3 rounds.
Right.
That's huge. And now granted, I mean, you know, we're probably a more creative, high functioning group than most, right? But this structure is built to get non-drawers to be able to do that same thing with you, to go with you on that journey. We're getting tight on time, so I want to cover one more thing in this real quick, because I talked about, so early on, we talked about the sort of a piece of, depending on sort of how you're using this exercise, there may come a point where you have to start to down select to a smaller feature set that somebody with important letters in front of their name thinks is meaningful, valuable, et cetera. And to go through that sort of prioritization exercise in a sort of out loud, show of hands vote kind of thing, everybody's going to defer to the hippo in the room, right? The highest paid opinion, highest paid person's opinion. A better way to approach it can be to do something like dot voting, where you give everybody a set of colored dots and let them silently go from poster to poster and apply 1, 2, or 3 dots to the features or pieces of the prototype that they think are most useful, compelling, interesting, worthy of further exploration. And that, for you as a designer, one, gets the highest paid person's opinion in the room sort of mitigated a little bit, but 2, it gives you a sense of all these different perspectives that you brought into the room. If opinions are starting to converge around certain features, like the squirrel trap being particularly important in this group's prototype, or the wine bottle recirculator system being particularly important in this prototype, that's going to give you the guidance you need to sort of figure out, okay, what of all of this stuff can I further recombine into a solution that somebody with big D designer in front of their name can actually do something more better, different, right? So a thing to think about. Going beyond dot voting a little bit, another technique that can be really useful is, instead of giving people dots, this works really well with executives, giving them monopoly money. Because eventually you're going to ask them to spend money on this thing, right? And to get them in that headspace sooner rather than later, they think about how they're going to be spending money all the time. That's their job, to think about where to spend and not spend money. So you give them $100 in monopoly money and say, okay, where would you spread this money around on these different features? And that's going to make them think in a much tougher way about, is this really important or is it not? And that's kind of a technique that ties back to, if you guys are familiar with Edward de Bono's book, The Six Thinking Hats. It's kind of like that, being sort of open to all possibilities early and then starting to be more critical and rigorous as that sort of 6 Thinking Hats process goes along. It kind of ties back to that. So obviously not a thing we had time to do tonight, but another technique that you can bring into studio if you need to get that kind of outcome from it. Cheers, y'all built a product. Awesome, 2.5 hours. Yay.
Let's go get some wine.
We are at 9 o'clock on the button. What questions, if any, can I answer for you guys after having been through this? Is this useful? Hard?
Yes.
Do you feel like this is actionable? Like, is this something you guys can bring into your work lives?
Definitely. So I have a question.
Sure.
What other resources might we look at or read on our own? And I'm sure there's probably a list somewhere that you can refer us to.
Boom!
Yes.
Perfect trees, interwebs. This was, feel free to cell phone that, but Lauren has the slides too. A lot of this actually might be a little passé for you guys, being more sort of down in the weeds drawers of things, but 6 Thinking Hats is up there. Design Studio Method by Brian Sullivan is great. Bill Buxton's book, Sketching User Experiences, is cool because he gets into other ways of sort of sketching, right? Like, it's not just drawing, right? You can actually go make a thing or cut images out of magazines to make prototypes, right? There's all kinds of different ways you can start to really freestyle a little bit. Back of the Napkin's great for sort of bringing techniques to the table that, you know, non-drawers can get comfortable with, right? Like Dan Rome really has sort of helped, you know, teach executives how to get comfortable drawing. The framework, this sort of design charrette framework, there's a Nielsen Norman Group article by Kara Pernice that's really great. It's sort of a more condensed, less sort of PowerPointy version of what I just showed you guys. I mean, I'm kind of standing on the shoulders of giants in a lot of ways around that. As is Todd Warfel's video on Vimeo, the Design Studio Method, also really useful. And Kate Kaplan's piece on NNG is also really good, just in terms of thinking about, like, what are the issues that are going to come up when you're running with these? How do you prep for it? What issues are going to come up? The, you know, kind of curveballs that you might have to deal with. again, it's kind of odds and ends, but beyond what's here, I obviously have spent a lot of time sort of thinking about this in order to be able to sort of talk about it to others. So feel free to reach out to me on the Twitter box, and I'm happy to talk where, when, however y'all would find it useful. And thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob.